Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today we will be listening to the 9th part of What If Deku Had a Game Inventory Quirk. If you enjoy, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing down below, and don't forget to hit that bell icon so you get notified when videos go live. Now, without further ado, let's get into the video. Chapter 33. Shouta slammed a fist against the door frame of Yayorozu's room. Damn it! That's 3 students gone within the span of a couple weeks. Joe appeared out of nowhere and smacked his knee with her cane. She hissed, "Quiet. Do you want to disturb her?" He glared down at the elderly heroine. "You've said yourself that her current state isn't liable to change anytime soon. I doubt a little banging is going to do anything." He bowed his head, and his fist tightened. I can't deal with the fact that I've lost 3 kids. Especially from this class. They've had the most potential of any year I've taught, and yet they've had some of the biggest losses. At the start of the year, I thought they'd stick together like glue, but... Joe sighed. "You've grown attached to them. Losing any of them feels like a chunk taken out of your heart, doesn't it?" Shouta nodded wordlessly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his signature yellow goggles, staring down at them morosely. "When I accepted the teaching position, I swore that I wouldn't lose anyone else important, that I'd keep the kids safe. And then I managed to screw that up, too." The sound of approaching footsteps caught his attention, and he raised his head as Hisashi walked up to him. "Hey. Press conference is in an hour. Nezu wants you ready as soon as possible." Shouta sighed, pocketing the goggles and standing upright. "I still don't know why the fuck we're doing this." Hisashi hummed sympathetically. "I don't know either, but I make it a habit not to question the rat god. Come, let's get moving. Yayorozu's not gonna die just because you're not in the room with her." Reluctantly, Shouta allowed himself to be dragged down the hall, tossing one last glance at his class vice rep laying there. "We'll find a way. I promise. We're not gonna let such a promising future be cut short." As the pressure on his head subsided, Izuku regained his senses as he fell to his knees on the floor, coughing as he tried to find his bearings. Above him, he could hear Sensei chuckling. "My, so young Yayorozu is in a coma as a result of Endeavor abusing his youngest, is she? What a shame. A quirk as magnificent as hers deserves to be free. Perhaps I should pay her a visit at some point." Izuku snarled, "You keep your filthy hands off my vice rep, or I swear on everything holy and demonic." Sensei hummed in amusement. "Holy and demonic? That's a new one. Most heroes I've fought only ever swear on all that is holy." Izuku glared up at the villain. "Sometimes, there's an evil so terrible that it needs God and Satan to take care of it." Sensei chuckled. "My, you're quite the bold one, say point. Not nearly as haughty as your former classmate, but at least you know where to toe the line. Young Terminus believed he could make demands of me, and, well, I simply couldn't let that stand." Izuku slowly pulled himself to his feet, leaning against the wall away from the villain. "So, what now?" Sensei hummed. "Not much, I suppose. Your quirk is an interesting one, but I've never enjoyed taking stockpiling quirks. It's just so annoying to have to collect a specific resource just to use a given power. And it's not viable for a Nomua, since it requires some level of cognition. I suppose I'll just let Tomura have his way with you." He snapped his fingers, and Izuku coughed as black sludge poured from his mouth, covering him. Something shifted, and he fell onto the floorboards of the bar. As his vision cleared, he could see Dabi and Shigaraki standing nearby, ready to step in if necessary. "Well, that was unpleasant." Todoroki stared at him. "You don't seem very shocked. Did he not take your quirk like he did mine?" Izuku pounded his chest with his fist, coughing a few times to clear the rest of the sludge out of his system. "Nah. He hates stockpiling quirks. And mine's probably more annoying than others, considering it requires 2 resources to work, while other stockpiles usually only need 1. The kid with the gas mask huffed. "As riveting as this is, UA's holding a press conference. Again. Wanna put it on the big screen, Hansi?" Shigaraki grabbed the remote from the bar with 4 fingers, pressing the power button. The flat-screen TV above the bar flickered on, showing a live feed from UA's conference room. Izuku could see Nezu sitting in center frame, with Aizawa-sensei on the mammal's right and Vlad King on his left. A reporter was speaking, but Izuku could only focus on how haggard his teacher looked. The bags under his eyes were worse than normal, and his eyes were red and puffy. The man obviously hadn't taken Izuku's capture well, but he was somehow managing to hold it together for the conference. Suddenly, Izuku's senses tingled, and he tore his gaze away from the TV, scanning the room for whatever was making him uneasy. Glancing over the bar, he could see a smaller screen by the wine rack that was displaying security footage from the entrance. Izuku went pale as he recognized the signature flaming costume of Endeavor. Shit. He hurled himself away from the outside wall, just as a tremendous force tore a hole through the brick and sent a huge gust blowing through the bar. Mirako stepped in through the breach, grinning widely. Knock knock, motherfuckers. Kamui Wood swung in and released his lacquered chain prison, binding everyone else in an instant. Before anyone could react, a thin red line stabbed through Kurojiri's head, and the bartender slumped over, unconscious. The red line emerged and unfolded to reveal the form of the number 4 hero, Edgeshot. Nowhere to run, League of Villains. Shigaraki grunted. Guess it was inevitable, given how much we pestered UA already. A low voice rumbled, hold it. Izuku's eyes narrowed as Endeavor stepped in through the hole in the wall. I heard that my errant son is among you. I will be taking him back now. Todoroki scoffed from where he was still sitting nonchalantly in one of the booths. I doubt you'd be interested in another null. Endeavor huffed. You stoop so low as to lie that you do not have the power I gifted you. Your attempts at humor are pitiful, Shouto. Todoroki snarled, I have never made jokes, and I have no intention to make jokes in the future, if I even have one. My quirk was stolen, my revenge foiled before I even had a shot at your sorry hide. Endeavor took a few steps back, his eyes widening. Then he growled, fine. Rot with the rest of these scum. I have no use for quirkless filth. Todoroki raised an eyebrow. So, are you finally going to pull Mother out of that mental hospital to try and make another masterpiece? Endeavor huffed. I have no reason to explain anything to worthless scum like you. Izuku held his hands up. Gentlemen, now's not the time to air your family's dirty laundry. Endeavor glared at him. Stay out of this, boy. This is not your business. Izuku snarled, when your abuse makes your kid put my vice rep in a coma, you bet your fiery ass it's my business. Endeavor scoffed. Children should keep their noses out of where they don't belong. Suddenly, pressure surged in Izuku's throat, and black sludge erupted from his mouth, alongside every one of the villains. Before the sludge swallowed him completely, Izuku could see Mirako lunging towards him. Gravity took hold, and Izuku fell out of the sludge into what looked like the destroyed ruins of a warehouse. Sensei's voice rang out, my, that was a close call. Do not worry, Tamura, I will always be here for you. As Izuku took in his surroundings, he recognized the tall buildings of Kamino Ward lining the area. The warehouse had been mostly destroyed, save for a single wall. But his attention was focused on the bodies of heroes strewn about the area. Best Jeanist, Tiger, Gang Orca, and especially the massive form of Mount Lady lying against a ruined skyscraper. Best Jeanist looked the most injured of the four, with a massive hole in his stomach and his breathing labored. Shigaraki slowly climbed to his feet. How come you didn't warp the hero killer with us, Sensei? I thought you told me that he was an important member of the League. The villain smacked a hand against his skull-themed helmet. Oh, dearie me. I seem to have forgotten. Not to worry, just a simple flick of the wrist, and... Another cloud of black sludge formed in midair, and Stain dropped out of it, clad in full costume, looking just like how Izuku remembered from the broadcast during internships. Took you long enough. I was expecting to be gone before I heard the cries of the heroes in the bar. Though, I'm surprised they didn't think to check upstairs for any stragglers. Sensei tooted. Such is the way of heroes in this generation, isn't it? So blind to anything not thrust in their face. Izuku nearly froze as Stain's gaze passed over him. That's the save point boy, isn't it? Shigaraki's supposed player too. Sensei nodded. Indeed. Tamura seemed so fond of him, I believed it prudent to bring him with the rest of the league. Stain huffed, walking over and crouching in front of him. As he leaned closer, he whispered, All for One has exposed himself. Now seems like a good time to break code. Izuku's eyes widened in understanding. Before he could do anything, there was a rush of wind, and All for One, as he was apparently called, pivoted in midair to catch Miruko's signature Luna fall. "You're going down, potato face." All for One chuckled. "Really? The number 6 hero? I would have expected All Might to show up at the very least." Miruko huffed. "Apparently the big lug's too injured for hero work. Something about the Todoroki brat?" All for One let out a small noise of surprise. "Is that so? Perhaps I judged the boy too harshly, if he managed to cripple All Might himself." Suddenly, a bang resonated throughout the area, and Miruko jumped back just as a concentrated blast slammed into All for One's upper chest, incinerating the lower part of his mask and sending him flying back several meters into a wall, causing a pile of rubble to fall on top of him. A familiar voice roared, "Fuck off, egghead." Another wall crumbled, and Izuku's heart soared as he saw the hero hopefuls of One standing there in full hero costume. Kyuka's gaze locked onto him, and he swore he saw her shoulders sag a good few inches. Clambering to his feet, Izuku turned on his heel and tossed up a two-fingered salute towards the league. "Well, it's been fun, but babe's calling, and I'd be damned if I didn't accept." He fell backwards, manifesting his extreme gear in midair behind him. As expected, the force from the board pushing off the ground set him flying through the air, backflipping until he landed safely in Kyuka's arms. Without missing a beat, she grunted, "I'm getting Gremlin to install a tracking chip in your hero costume." Izuku chuckled. "That's fair." Suddenly, the ground rumbled, and All for One rose from the rubble, his attention locked on the 8 of them. "My, UA deems it necessary to send children into battle? What has the world come to?" Izuku slid out of Kyuka's arms and nimbly landed on his feet, striding forward to stand next to Katsuki. "Children, sure, but pretty damn powerful children. And your world's about to come to a screeching halt of the Tartaru's variety." All for One chuckled. "How cute. You children actually think you stand a chance against one who possesses hundreds, even thousands of quirks? Truly laughable." Katsuki grinned. "Who said we had to deal with your quirks?" Suddenly, All for One dropped to the ground, looking at his hand in confusion. Strips of grey cloth wrapped around him and pulled him back into the air, just as a dark figure dropped from the sky and slammed him back into the ground. As the dust faded, Izuku's grin widened as he saw Eraserhead standing on top of All for One, glaring down at the villain with his quirk activated. "You're fucking insane if you think you're laying a filthy hand on any of my students." Unfortunately, the mood shattered when All for One's body started glowing. Eraserhead paused, only to jump back as the villain started expanding, his suit ripping and his shoes flying off of his feet. The helmet started creaking, then burst as All for One's head started inflating at a rapid pace. Different colored beams of light started flashing from various points on his body, and an ominous hissing noise began to fill the area. Izuku went pale as he realized what was going on. Eraserhead cut off his primary quirk, which means there's nothing protecting his body from the strain of the thousands of quirks he has stored up. He's literally going to burst from the power. Katsuki swore under his breath. "The blast radius isn't going to be small, I'll tell you that much. How do we get his ass out of here?" Izuku grinned. "Simple. We recreate the quirk apprehension test, but on a larger scale." "Huh?" Izuku spun on his heel. "Uravite. Send his ass into the stratosphere." The brunette nodded, immediately tapping her chest and shooting forward, bounding across the open landscape. "On it." Izuku turned to the others. "Everyone else, get the injured clear. We want as few people sticking around when this nuke goes off. With any luck, we'll detonate it high enough that it won't cause any damage, but it pays to be prepared." The group nodded and immediately split up. Izuku grabbed Katsuki's arm before the blonde could head towards the wounded heroes. "What? You need to pop a cap in his bitch ass. The guy's gonna do as much as he can to keep himself from detonating, and Eraserhead can only have his quirk active for so long. If Erasure shuts off before the villain goes kaboom, then he's going to get his quirks back under control, and we can't let that happen. This guy needs to go down here and now." Katsuki shook his head. "I don't have that kind of precision. My AP shot still needs more work before it can travel the distance that we need. You're the only one who can do it from far enough away. You've got a sniper rifle in your inventory, right?" Izuku quickly checked his supplies, and the classic appeared in his right hand. "If we need to make him explode, then this one's my best bet. Go help the others." As Katsuki ran off, Izuku turned and took a deep breath. Just gotta make one shot to save all of Japan. No pressure, right? His instincts flared, and he snapped off a shot that knocked away the revolver of the kid in the gas mask. Oi! I'm trying to save the country here. The kid scoffed, purple mist flowing from his arms. Why should I give a crap about the country? You're one of the idiots who lives in it. The kid raised a hand to retort, paused, then sighed. Fair. Izuku nodded and turned his attention back to where Okako was standing ready. He raised his left hand, suddenly holding his Meta Knight sword, and sent a crescent shot flying straight upwards. On cue, Okako lunged forward and slammed her hands into All for One's body, activating her quirk and sending the ball of flesh rocketing upward. Izuku pulled back on the trigger of the classic, feeling the mechanisms of the rifle whir. As the villain's form soared higher and higher, the Eraserhead kept his gaze locked on it. As the rifle clicked to signal a fully charged shot, Izuku brought the scope up to his face and tracked the villain's path as he shot skyward. Running through several mental calculations in his head, Izuku shifted his aim to where he knew that the villain would be on the edge of Eraser's range. The second that the barely distinguishable head was within his crosshair, Izuku let go of the trigger, the bullet streaking upwards and leaving a distortion in the air behind it. The explosion was almost a replacement for the sun itself. The surrounding sky was filled with rings of varying colors, a spectrum of destruction radiating from the blinding white core. Izuku pulled out his Hylian shield and ducked behind it, mere moments before a blast of hot wind scorched the area. For a brief moment, Izuku was scared that the others wouldn't make it, but out of nowhere, several walls of deep blue ice shot up from the ground. The heat managed to melt the first few centimeters, but more ice walls sprung up to support the first ones. After a few seconds, the blinding white ball in the sky began to fade, and the intense heat started to let up. The sky began to return to the black of night, and Izuku finally felt brave enough to emerge from underneath the shield. What he saw was enough to take his breath away. Kamino Ward resembled a photo of pre-Quirk Hiroshima after the detonation of the atomic bomb. Save for the areas behind the ice walls, everything was blackened and burned. The closest skyscrapers were charred to a crisp, and the ones behind those weren't much better. Thankfully, there didn't appear to be any casualties, since the area had evidently been cleared out beforehand. As the rest of the raid team started emerging from behind shelter, Izuku raised an eyebrow at the white-haired woman standing nearby. He walked over and placed a hand on his hip. "And who might you be?" The woman grinned. "Todoroki Fuyamai. I'm here for my dumbass younger brother. Though, now that I think about it, I'm pretty sure my dumbass older brother is here, too." Shouto pulled himself out from behind the wall of ice protecting the league, and his eyes widened. "Fuyamai? How? Father never trained you." Fuyamai huffed. "He also never bothered to keep anyone from visiting Mom, aside from you and Tuya. Mom is Dad's opposite, remember? Powerful ice quirk that matches Hellflame in raw output." Dabi pulled himself up and over the ice wall and chuckled. "Can't believe you forgot that Yumi is my opposite as much as Mom is Dad's. Bet she considered that heat a light breeze." Fuyamai scoffed. "It was very warm, I'll have you know. Oh, and that reminds me." She immediately shot forward and slammed a beautiful right hook into Dabi's jaw. As the villain went reeling, she shouted, "That's for leaving me to take care of Natsuo and Shouto by myself for 10 years, you asshole." Shouto's eyes shot open. "Since when do you swear?" She rounded on him. "Oh, don't even get me started, Mr. Broadcast my location to every person in Japan." Izuku chuckled as the woman berated her two brothers, before glancing over at the rest of the league emerging from behind their cover. He walked over, glancing over at Shigaraki. "So, are we gonna do this the easy way, or the hard way?" Shigaraki snorted. "You already know I'm going the easy way, brat." A chorus of protests rose up, only to fall silent when the man snapped his fingers. "Oi! Listen up. I was never the true leader of the league, and I was already planning to defect before you guys even attacked the camp. Hell, the only reason the heroes knew to attack both locations was because of the info Kurojiri and I gave them. You can make your own decisions, but I'm done being a pawn." Stain grunted. "I will be going off on my own, since I was never an official league member in the first place." He glanced over at Izuku. "I will not target heroes, unless they prove that they cannot be trusted to change their ways for the better. I will, however, look for ways to atone for my more unsavory actions." Tonight has proven that there are those who carry out their evils under the cover of anonymity. Perhaps Stendhal will rise again. The man stepped backwards into the shadows, vanishing in an instant. Izuku turned his attention to the rest of the league, raising one eyebrow in a question. So, what will the rest of you do? The kid took a step forward, purple mist flowing from his hand. A simple glance from Eraserhead cut off the mist, and Izuku stepped forward, laying a short right hook into the kid's mask, knocking him flat on his back. Anyone else? One by one, the rest of the league raised their hands in surrender. Chapter 34. Mom was beside herself with tears once Izuku got back to the apartment. He was immediately wrapped in a blanket and deposited on the couch, Kyuka and Katsuki positioned on either side of him. As he leaned into their warmth, Izuwa-sensei took Mom into the kitchen and explained what had happened. Izuku knew for a fact that Mom had her hand over her mouth the entire time Izuwa-sensei was describing the events in the ruins of the warehouse. Izuwa-sensei finished. Afterwards, everyone present was checked over at Kamino General Hospital. Thankfully, none of the students were injured during the events of the raid, and civilian casualties were minimal. Mom breathed a sigh of relief. Thank you. However, this isn't the first time UA's been attacked this year. What guarantee can you give that the students won't be put in danger again so soon? Izuku twisted in his seat to stare over the back of the couch. Mom? You can't seriously be considering pulling me from UA, can you? Mom smiled. I couldn't do that, sweetie. You've been so happy, I couldn't take that from you. But I'm sure it's a concern that other parents might have. Izuwa-sensei nodded. Fair point. We have implemented extra security measures, but after one of our students was kidnapped away from school grounds, we're making a few changes in order to ensure that said security measures are in use as often as possible. Namely, the introduction of on-campus dorms. Izuku raised an eyebrow. Dorms. We've constructed several dorm halls on campus, all secured by various protections that I legally cannot discuss, but rest assured that nothing gets in or out without our permission. Every class has its own dorm hall, and while using them isn't mandatory, it's highly recommended by the staff so that we can ensure our students' safety. Mom hummed. Interesting. What sort of amenities will there be? Every hall has its own kitchen, dining room, common room, and courtyard. Each room will have its own bathroom, air conditioning, and balcony. Students will be allowed to decorate or remodel their rooms as they please. Also, students living on campus will be provided with access to any of the gyms, so that they can keep up their training regimens on their own time. We're still working out the details of scheduling, but after the Todoroki snafu, we will allow for regular breaks. Mom nodded. Good to hear. Is there some sort of extra fee for moving into the dorms? I'm aware that some of UA's students may be experiencing financial difficulties. Izuwa-sensei shook his head. Using the dorms doesn't change the cost of tuition by even a single yen. If anything, it makes it cheaper to attend, since students won't have to pay for transport. There will be a basic supply of ingredients paid for by the school, but specific materials need to be purchased by the students on organized shopping trips. And before you ask, there will be at least one teacher assigned to each dorm hall, and we've all been given a crash course in cooking by lunch rush. Recovery Girl is on standby in the event of medical emergencies, and dietary changes or restrictions go through her. We want to make sure our students are getting enough to eat, and that they aren't eating something they shouldn't. Mom smiled softly. Good. I'm glad to hear that UA isn't skimping on the quality of their care. Izuku snorted. Plus Ultra is kinda their thing. Izuwa-sensei nodded. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the dorms aren't mandatory, but the teachers will be going around to their students' families and discussing the possibility. Since I already had to bring Midoriya here, I figured I'd knock out two birds with one stone. Mom chuckled. Of course. So long as they're allowed to visit their families every so often, I don't see a reason to keep Izuku from going. Toshinori stuck his head through the doorway, taking in the prone form of young Yaoyorozu. Still no change, I take it? Shozenji-san nodded, a clipboard in her hand. Her vitals are as steady and low as they were the day of the final exams. I've been calling in as many favors as I can to find someone who can help her, but they've all been a wash so far. Toshinori sighed. I suppose I should resume my search for a successor. Shozenji-san gave him an odd look. And why do you think you need one? He opened his mouth to respond, but paused. She continued, think about it. All for One is dead and gone, and the League all got arrested, save for Stain, who we already know won't be much of a problem for us. You've said that One for All was meant to fight All for One, so isn't its purpose fulfilled? There's no reason to burden anyone else with it, as far as I can tell. Toshinori nodded slowly. I suppose you are correct that One for All no longer needs to be passed on. But doesn't the country still need a symbol of peace? Shozenji-san sighed. Not anymore, it doesn't. We only needed a symbol before to counteract All for One's silent tyranny. With that gone, and with more competent heroes than ever, maybe it's time for you to step back and let the young ones take the helm. Izuku gazed up at the building in front of them. So, does every dorm hall look like a miniature of UA's main building, or is this a special treat? Aizawa-sensei slapped a hand over his face as he let out a noise that Izuku recognized as a barely concealed snort. The hero cleared his throat and stood upright. Every dorm hall has the exact same design, though the resemblance to the main building was not intentional, I assure you. He walked up to one of the sets of double doors at the front and swung them open, and 1A took that as their cue to head inside. Set by the entrance was a lowered area with several cubbies on the right side, which the students instinctively stowed their shoes in. Upon further inspection, the cubbies were labeled with their seat numbers, which prompted a writhing tangle of limbs in order to make sure the correct shoes were in the correct spot. To the left of the entryway was a common room, featuring 2 couches of similar size set in front of a large flat-screen TV. Behind the common room was a decently sized kitchen, complete with a refrigerator, dishwasher, range, microwave, toaster oven, and several cabinets. There was a door visible in the wall of the common room placed right before the entrance to the kitchen, which revealed a courtyard in the center of the building. An elevator was visible right next to said door, along with another door that led to a flight of stairs. To the right of the entryway was an extension of the common room, which had several tables and chairs. Behind that was a room holding washing machines and dryers, along with cabinets that probably held all manner of cleaning supplies. Another door to the courtyard was set just outside the laundry room, and another elevator and flight of stairs next to that door. There was also a door set in the back of the laundry room that was labeled with Aizawa-sensei's name. Must lead to his room. Aizawa-sensei brought them into the west side common room and turned on the TV, which displayed 4 floor plans that seemed to match the upper floors of the building. Your luggage has been brought here ahead of time and has been placed in your assigned rooms. You are free to decorate your rooms as you see fit. Now, before you're dismissed for the afternoon, a few ground rules. You are required to be in your assigned dorm room at 10 o'clock every night. The exceptions are if you arrange a sleepover with friends and clear it with me beforehand. After 10 o'clock, you are not allowed to be loud enough that you can be heard at least 2 rooms away. Boys' rooms are to the west, girls' rooms are to the east. You cannot leave the building after 9 p.m. Any questions? Silence reigned, and he nodded. Good. Dismissed. I want you all unpacked by the time classes resume on Monday. Tomura raised an eyebrow as a scarecrow-thin blonde man walked into his cell. And who are you supposed to be? The man coughed into his fist. Apologies. My health isn't what it used to be. My name is Yagi Toshinori. I work as a business teacher at UA. Tomura grunted. Nifty. Why are you here? Yagi chuckled. Oh, I'm just the taxi. His shirt wiggled, and Tomura hummed with surprise as the principal of UA popped out. Greetings. Am I a dog, a mouse, or a bear? What's important is, I have an offer for you. Tomura huffed. Really? And here I thought the commission would insist on me being thrown in Tartarus for life. Nedzu chuckled into his paw. Well, I just so happen to know someone who is quite well versed in making powerful people listen to them. One quick phone call later, the commission was willing to hear me out. In any case, how would you like a second chance at a normal life? Tomura hummed. Depends. What kind of second chance? Nedzu strode forward and linked his paws together. The man you knew as sensei took you when you were young, and began raising you into the ways of villainy almost immediately. As such, you didn't have much of an opportunity to live your life normally. I'm offering to rectify that mistake. After a brief rehabilitation course with Kitsubutsu High School, you'll be allowed to walk free and live as you wish. Tomura raised an eyebrow. That's it? No other restrictions. I just do some time at a rehab program and I'm a free man. Nedzu let out a short bark of laughter. Well, there is a slight caveat in that you won't be allowed to become a villain again, but I think you've had quite enough of that. Tomura snorted. You've got that right. What about the rest of the league? Are they gonna get second chances, too? Netsu smiled. Well, that all depends on if they accept. Naturally, I plan to make the offer to all of them, though I have my suspicions on how some of them will react. Well, all of them except for one. Tomura raised an eyebrow. And who would that be? Netsu clasped his paws together. You see, we've hit a bit of a snag with Kurogiri. Immediately after All for One detonated, Kurogiri became unresponsive, exactly like the Nomu that you used at the USJ. Upon further examination, we've discovered that he shares many of the same traits as the Nomu, namely, containing the DNA of multiple people. We're operating under the assumption that his autonomy was achieved through the use of some form of mind control quirk, which became inactive upon All for One's death. However, he did react very briefly when Eraserhead, Present Mike, or Midnight entered his cell. As such, we'll be transporting him to UA in order to try and get a better idea of what his situation is. Tomura huffed. Good. If you ever find out, let me know, yeah. Netsu smiled. I believe that can be arranged. Izuku flopped onto the two-seater couch in the common room and sighed deeply, sinking into the cushions. Who knew that unpacking could be so exhausting? Katsuki huffed as he sat down next to Izuku. Well, when you've gotta unpack as much stuff as you brought, I wouldn't be surprised if you're ready to crash at any moment. Izuku cracked one eye open in a half-hearted glare at the blonde. What, are you saying I packed too much stuff? Katsuki snorted. Not even close. Too much would be about half again as much shit as you brought along, and even then, you'd still be leaving a good 50% of your stuff back at the apartment. How did you even fit all of that in your room when it's the same size as your dorm? Izuku grinned. Tetris. Katsuki groaned and grabbed the throw pillow on his side of the couch, immediately twisting and smacking Izuku in the face with it. Naturally, Izuku retaliated in kind, and the common room quickly turned into a pillow fight. At first, it was just the two of them, but the hero hopefuls quickly joined in. Kirishima and Kaminari took Katsuki's side, but the others were on Izuku's team. Just as it seemed that Katsuki was getting outnumbered 5-3, Siro and Ashido jumped in to help his side out. The entire time, Itsu was yelling something about proper behavior, but everyone tuned him out. Tsu was watching with interest, and Hagakure was clearly entranced by the ordeal. Satu, Shaoji, and Fumikage were silent watchers, though the latter was clearly rooting for Izuku's side, going off of the small noises he made every time someone landed a hit. Ajiro's attention was ping-ponging back and forth, and he would occasionally comment on a good hit from either side. Aoyama simply sat in the kitchen and watched with stars in his eyes. After a good 10 minutes, Aizawa-sensei marched out from the laundry room and snagged Izuku and Katsuki in his capture scarf, bringing them under his sharp gaze as the others fell silent. What the hell do you think you're doing? Izuku swallowed nervously. Getting comfortable, sir. Aizawa-sensei stared down at him. A bead of sweat rolled down his neck. After a few tense seconds, the hero grunted. You get a harder impact if you swing wider. Watch. In the blink of an eye, his capture scarf wrapped itself around a discarded pillow and swung it around, right into Shaoji's face. A collective gasp went up, and the taller boy stood there silently for a few seconds. He started chuckling, and he grabbed 6 pillows from the floor around him. Immediately, there was a massive scramble to find an available weapon, and the pillow fight resumed in earnest. Hisashi frowned at the odd sounds coming from the first floor of 1A's dorm hall. It's only the first day, and something's already up. Shouda's probably gonna have a field day with expulsions once he shows up. He opened one of the doors, and was suddenly hit in the face by a flying pillow. The noises stopped, and he removed the pillow from his face to see all of 1A frozen in place, pillows in hand. After a few seconds, Hisashi realized that Shouda was among the frozen, Hitachi clamped to his waist. He couldn't help but grin and shift his grip on the pillow in his hand. Oh, it's on now, kiddos. You've just challenged the master. The area exploded into motion, and Hisashi laughed wildly as he ducked and weaved around the swinging pillows and waving limbs. Shouda, you sour grumpus, I knew it was a matter of time before you mentally adopted these kids. Inko glanced over as her phone dinged. She pulled herself out of her office chair and walked over to where it was sitting on her bedside table. Picking it up, Her eyes widened when she saw that she'd received a text from Izuku. Oh, no. Did something go wrong with the dorms already? Nervously, she opened the text, mind filled with every possible disaster. However, as the words and attached image registered, the tension bled out of her shoulders as she sighed with relief. Izuku, not even a day in and the place already feels like home. Izuwa-sensei might even be better than you. The image showed Izuku and his class laying in a giant pile in the dorm common room, pillows and feathers strewn about everywhere. Inko giggled to herself as she noticed Izuwa-san and Yamada-san trapped near the bottom of the pile underneath the students. In the photo, Izuku was laughing, and she wiped away a tear at the enormous smile on his face. You've come so far. Chapter 35. Summer break soon came to a close, and classes resumed. That Monday, Izuwa-sensei walked into the classroom and was met with complete silence. He nodded in satisfaction. Good. Now, as I mentioned at the start of the training camp, the HPSC has made it mandatory for the first-year hero students at UA to attend the provisional license exam this September. In fact, after the events of Kamino, they've doubled down, citing the rise in criminal activity as a need for more heroes in the field. While UA would love nothing more than to take it slow with you Hellions, our hands are unfortunately tied. He scanned the class and nodded at the lack of complaining. Right. In other news, Todoroki has disappeared. Izuku frowned. When? Izuwa-sensei sighed. Apparently, his oldest sister brought him home with her, but after that, we lost track of him, and we don't have any leads on where he might be. In any case, since he left, we had an open spot in the roster, and due to a lack of qualified or interested bodies in other courses, we had to get creative to fill the final seat. The door slammed open, and a stocky boy with slanted eyes walked in with a huge grin on his face. Greetings, Class 1A of UA. I wasn't expecting us to meet each other like this. I hope to become a passionate hero alongside all of you. His hand smacked into his hips, and he dipped into a bow that sent his head slamming into the floor. Izuku immediately fell into a laughing fit, clutching at his sides and causing the rest of the class to exchange confused glances. Once he'd recovered, he stood up out of his seat and walked over, pulling the newcomer into a headlock. Knew you'd show up eventually, Twister. The hero hopefuls let out various noises of recognition, and Katsuki started cackling. Izuwa-sensei sighed, before raising his head to address the others. 1A, this is Yoarashi Ineza, a transfer student from Shikatsu. He had actually beaten Todoroki in the recommendations exam, but refused his offer. Due to his score, he was the first one we reached out to for potentially filling the missing seat. Yoarashi, you've got the open seat behind Tokoyami, the one with the raven head. Once everyone was seated, Kyuka raised her hand and asked, Sensei, how is Momo doing? The hero winced. Not much improvement. She's holding steady, but she hasn't shown any signs of consciousness yet. We're still holding out hope for Recovery Girl to find someone with her connections, so we're keeping Yayoro's spot open for her. Unfortunately, we still haven't found a good solution for her state yet. The class fell silent. Izuku's smile melted off his face, and he clutched at his left arm. I should have said something. I knew something was off with Todoroki, but I didn't say anything out of fear that it might backfire on me. It's my fault that this happened. Izuwa-sensei clapped his hands together, drawing everyone's attention. Right. You have until the end of homeroom to get acquainted with your new classmate. Classes will resume as normal, though we are having a special guest for Foundational Heroics this afternoon. Dismissed. He walked out of the door, and the hero hopefuls were immediately crowded around Yoarashi's desk. Izuku stepped forward with a grin and said, Right, introductions. Midoriya Izuku, class rep, and bush boss. Katsuki smirked. Bakuga Katsuki, vice rep, and king explosion. Jiro Kyuka, totally jacked and Izuku's girlfriend. Ayama Hitachi, Insomnicat. Urarika Okako, Newton's Bane. Kauda Kauji, Snow White. Kaminari Denki, Sparky Way. Kiri's Hima Ajaru, Rock Riot. Yoarashi grinned. Yoarashi Ineza, Mr. Twister. But you already knew that. He frowned. Wait, where's baby gremlin? Izuku smirked. Hatsune. She's in the support course, you'll probably meet her at lunchtime. She handles all of our costume and gear maintenance and upgrades. Top-notch quality. Fumikage coughed. Izuku, I believe the rest of us would like to get familiar with our new classmate. I am Tokoyami Fumikage. A pleasure to make your acquaintance, Yoarashi-kun. Yoarashi smiled. Great to meet you too, man. The morning classes went by in a blur. Yoarashi quickly made himself comfortable, throwing himself into the coursework with the same enthusiasm that he wielded during gaming sessions. He wasn't half bad, either, being on par with Kaka academically. In addition, he was great at lifting the mood. He always had a funny line or a nice compliment ready, and he was more than willing to throw them out whenever someone got even the slightest bit down. He and Kirishima seemed to feed off each other's energy, and just being near them lifted Izuku's spirits. When lunchtime came, Hatsum took one look at him and immediately deduced his identity. Hey Twister. Took you long enough to show up? How come you never checked in on Discord? Yoarashi laughed, setting his tray down and rubbing at the back of his neck. Believe me, I wanted to. But Shiketsu is super strict and doesn't like their students having outside contact or relationships. They're more like a military boot camp than a school, honestly. I'm glad that UA offered me a transfer between semesters. I was getting tired of how stiff the teachers were. Izuku frowned. So, how come you declined your offer to UA in the first place? Yoarashi's expression plummeted. Ah. That. See, I was really excited about getting recommended, but then I happened to be in the same group as Todoroki. I tried talking to him, but he coldly brushed me off. Normally, I would have ignored it, but I had a bad experience with Endeavor a few years before that. Katsuki scowled. Are you saying you assumed Icy Hot was as bad as his old man? Yoarashi shook his head vehemently. No, nothing like that. I just didn't trust myself to be nice to the guy. If I'd accepted, I didn't think I'd be able to look at him without seeing his dad and getting annoyed. Kyuka huffed. Well, if you'd accepted, he wouldn't have gotten in on recommendations. You watched him hijack that press conference near the end of last semester, right? Yoarashi nodded. Yeah. I doubt Endeavor would have been pleased if his masterpiece didn't pass the recommendations exam. I kind of felt sorry for him, having such an unpassionate hero for a dad. Izuku grunted. We've all agreed that Endeavor sucks. I honestly don't know how he's still active after the whole Todoroki snafu. Katsuki huffed. Simple. While people hate his guts, and for good reason, they can't deny how efficient he is. Like it or not, the guy puts away more criminals than any other hero. He'll probably drop below Mirako at the next ranking, since his popularity ratings tanked. Izuku sighed. God, I hope so. That man desperately needs a swift boot up the ass. As the bell rang to signal the start of afternoon classes, Aizawa-sensei walked into the classroom to the expectant stares of the class. Right. Let's not waste time. Grab your costumes and get to Gym Gamma. Be sure to memorize the route, you'll be taking it a lot in the next few weeks. It took Yoarashi a few seconds to catch up to the others, but he fell into place alongside them quickly, and they were dressed and at the gym in only a couple minutes. As they filed through the large double doors, Aizawa-sensei nodded in satisfaction. Good. You've improved since the start of the year. In any case, you'll be spending your next few weeks of foundational heroics classes in this gym. He nodded to Cementos, who took that as his cue to step forward. While the USJ may be 13's pride and joy, Gym Gamma is my personal laboratory. The cement floor allows me to create varying platforms and terrain for different training exercises. In addition, Ectoplasm here will be able to provide you all with personal advisors and sparring partners. Both resources will be vital for your next assignment, super moves? Izuku raised his hand. Sir? You mentioned a special guest. Aizawa-sensei sighed. Yes. He placed a hand by his ear and said, you can come in now. A side door swung open, and most of Class 1 shrieked as Shigaraki strode in. Ashido screeched, villain. Izuku lightly smacked her across the back of the head. Calm down. Shigi defected after the Kamino incident. Shigaraki huffed. Don't call me Shigaraki. That was the name given to me by All for One. I don't want it anymore. I'm taking up my old username, Shimura Tenko. Izuku smirked. Alright then, Chimichanga. Shimura threw back his head and started cackling, and the class slowly relaxed their stances. Aizawa-sensei cleared his throat and announced, initially, the plan was for Shimura to attend the rehab course at Kitsubutsu High. Unfortunately, they can only hold so many at a time, and their spots were already filled. As such, Shimura will be fulfilling his rehabilitation requirements at UA. Katsuki frowned. Don't villain rehab courses require that the subjects stay on campus at all times? Where's the guy gonna sleep? Shimura chuckled. Well, policy dictates that I remain within easy grabbing distance of my parole officer, so I'm bunking with you brats. Don't worry, they stuck me on the second floor next to player 2. Cementos coughed into his fist. In any case, we were talking about your current assignment, yes? Aizawa-sensei nodded. Right. Pop quiz, what's a super move? Aiza raised his hand. Sir. Generally speaking, a super move is any technique that can be reliably used to end a fight quickly. The hero nodded. Good. Not all super moves are directly offensive, they come in various forms. The four most basic types are attack, defense, mobility, and restraint. Attack is the most common type. They're your Luna Falls, Canyon Cannons, etc. Defense is less common, seeing as limelights tend to prioritize offense over durability. Mobility is something like Aiza's Recipro Burst. While the technique itself isn't a direct attack, the huge boost in speed is more than dangerous enough to be considered a super move. Lastly, restraint moves don't cause damage to your opponent, but still render them unable to continue fighting. A good example is Lacquer Chain Prison. Hitachi raised his hand. You said that limelights prioritize offense over defense. What about underground heroes? Aizawa-sensei smirked. Good question. The main difference between Limelight and Underground is presentation. Limelight heroes call out the names of their techniques and are very flashy and eye-catching. On the flip side, Underground heroes don't name their techniques and focus on function over form. They do have specialized techniques, but we refer to them as finishers instead. Finishers don't have categories or names like super moves, but they do share some similarities. Most finishers you'll see involve restricting an opponent's movement, then taking them out while they're trapped. Izuku snapped his fingers. Like that move you pulled on All for One in Kamino. The hero coughed into his fist. Well, that was technically a variation involving being dropped from above by hawks, but yes. Shimura frowned. You know, I've been wondering, how were you in Kamino and at UA at the same time? Aizawa-sensei grinned. I wasn't. During second year, hero students are allowed to take an elective course in espionage and disguises. UA employs an underground hero for that class who happens to have a quirk that changes people's appearance, including himself. The Eraserhead at the conference. That was him. Izuku frowned. How come he made himself look like he was run ragged? When I watched the conference from the bar, you looked like you'd gone a week without sleep. Aizawa-sensei huffed. Had to sell the illusion that I was beating myself up too badly to do anything. We thought it'd make it more of a surprise when I showed up at Kamino. Izuku nodded. Makes sense. But back to super moves? Following the logical deduction, I'm guessing we're going to be developing our own super moves and finishers to use in the provisional license exam. Aizawa-sensei smirked. Bingo. Super moves and finishers can make or break a fight in either direction, and both take quite a lot of time to devise and refine. I'm certain some of you have already started the basics of your own super moves, like Bakugo's AP shot. Work on refining those to the point that you can practically do them in your sleep. The rest of you, start thinking about what potential super moves you could add to your own arsenals. Remember, a good hero is more than a one-trick pony. Now get to work, Hellspawn. Later that afternoon, after classes had let out, the hero hopefuls dragged Yoarashi down to the support workshop. As Izuku swung the double doors open, he stepped to one side and caught Mei in one arm in a practiced maneuver. She pulled her goggles onto her forehead and grinned, her face covered in soot. Hey, boss. Didn't think you were scheduled for a tune-up today. What's the occasion? Izuku huffed warmly. Figured I'd give Yoarashi an introduction to your work. Besides, his costume needs some upgrades. Mei wiped the soot off her face and grinned over at Yoarashi, who was clutching his costume case. You heard the man. Gimme. Reluctantly, the teen let go of the case, watching as Mei connected a cord from her workbench monitor to a port on the case, which pulled up a set of blueprints on the screen. Izuku whistled in admiration. I don't think that was a thing before final exams. When did that happen? May grinned wider. Power Loader noticed how often you guys were coming here for costume adjustments, so he redesigned the cases to hold the blueprints for the costumes. Everyone's got monitors that can access those files, and we can make changes in the files themselves before making the actual costume. It's great. She turned back to the screen and frowned. Yeesh. What are the costume designers at Shiketsu thinking? This thing's super bulky, and there's basically no head protection. Yoarashi rubbed at his neck. Well, I originally wanted to have something like an aviator's cap in there, but my support technician vetoed that, since we're required to wear our uniform caps in our hero costumes. I did say that Shiketsu is a lot more strict than UA. Izuku hummed. So, you're going for an aviator theme? Makes sense, considering your quirk. What is it, by the way? Yoarashi beamed. My quirk lets me control the air around me. I can whip up huge gusts for attack, defense, and even speed. With the help of that apparatus on my back, I can even fly. Izuku rubbed at his chin. What about fine control? Yoarashi tapped at his chin for a couple seconds. I'm not sure about specifics, but during my semester exam at Shiketsu, I could use my quirk to lift up a pile of rubble and sort it into piles of different materials in midair. I don't know if I could do something like sending a gust under a door and opening it from the other side, though, but I want to. Katsuki hummed. Okay, important question, do you prefer raw output or precision? My fighting style involves overwhelming an opponent with raw power, so my costume helps to increase my output. Izuku likes to dodge an opponent's attacks, then strike as hard as he can while they're open, so his outfit is designed to be protective without sacrificing mobility. Your costume is supposed to amplify your strengths and minimize your weaknesses. Yoarashi frowned and brought his hand up to his chin in thought. After a few seconds, he glanced up and nodded. I tend to prioritize using my quirk as either a method for trapping an opponent, or as a hold on something more physical. In my experience, wind on its own isn't very strong in terms of power output, especially when an opponent is low to the ground. My usual tactics involve blowing someone into the air or picking something up with my wind to smack them with it. Izuku hummed. So why all the exhaust ports? Yoarashi sighed. When I first had my costume designed, I didn't really have a style solidified yet, so I basically left it up to my support technician. I guess they figured I'd go for higher output based on my personality. May huffed. So, we're basically going for a complete overhaul. Yoarashi shrugged. If that helps, I don't see why not. You're the expert here, not me. She grinned. You're damn right I'm the expert here. She tapped on the screen and swiped the blueprints into a trash can in the bottom right corner, then cracked her knuckles. So, first things first, we need a basic shape for the costume. How mobile are you in a fight? Yoarashi frowned. It varies, really. Against a more powerful opponent, I tend to stay away and blow them from a distance, but if I'm facing someone small and quick, I'm darting around the area trying to find a good direction of attack. So, something variable, I guess. May hummed. Okay, so definitely a jumpsuit for the base, since they're the most flexible, literally and figuratively. Now, if you want to be mobile, giving yourself a third dimension is your best bet. You really like the jetpack thing on your old costume, right? Yoarashi nodded. Definitely. I can't really get air moving that well on my own, but I can redirect pre-existing wind currents and keep them going really easily. Since wind currents are stronger higher up, I want to be as high as possible in order to get the most effect out of my quirk. May rubbed at her chin, before launching into a series of taps and swipes on the monitor. When she backed away, the screen displayed an image of a mannequin with some sort of device on the back. The general shape was a wide obelisk cut in half through the top vertex, with the cut being at right angles to the short sides. Set in the base were two cylindrical holes that ended near the shoulder blades. Inside the holes were small fans that resembled helicopter rotors, and the blades were angled so that the two rotors would spin in opposite directions. There were also two angled holes on the back that led straight to the topmost blades. Yoarashi frowned. What's that supposed to do? I don't see a power supply anywhere. May grinned. That's the beauty of it, you're the power supply. She swiped her finger across the screen, which pulled up an internal view of the device. She pointed at the diagram, which showed that the blades near the top were different from the others along the shaft. See how these blades here are perpendicular to the axle? The idea is, you get these top blades spinning through these holes on the back, which in turn spins the angled blades that add some thrust. Of course, this is only a supplement, so you're gonna need to lift yourself directly with your quirk a bit, but I'm sure you can handle it. Yoarashi hummed and pointed at the screen, in between the two shafts. What if you added an empty cone in the middle? There'd be a lot of surface area in there for the wind to push on, so if I pushed a gust in there in addition to the spirals on the sides, it'd be more effective. May snapped her fingers. You're right, that might work. She quickly tapped away at the screen, inserting a hollow tube into the center of the pack. And hey, maybe we could do the same for the backs of your legs. More tubes, more thrust, right? Yoarashi frowned. No. Haven't tested how many wind streams I can keep up at the same time. Besides, I still kinda need at least one solid gust active for a long-ranged attack. Can't expect to be able to fly in and tackle my opponent every time. Izuku grinned. True. Sounds like we've got a lot of experimenting to do tomorrow during training. Yoarashi leaned back and laughed heartily. You betcha. 5 weeks later. Izuku stared up at the massive stadium in front of them as Class 1A filed off of the bus. Wow. And here I thought UA had a monopoly on Plus Ultra. This thing is bigger than the sports festival stadium. Maybe even bigger than the USJ. Yoarashi walked up next to him. Oh yeah, I've never been to the USJ. I've heard it's really cool. Shame your first time with it had to be ruined by the villain attack. Izuku shrugged. We'll probably get a better look at its features next year, once the attack isn't fresh in our minds. He turned on his heel to address the class. Right? 1A, listen up. His chest swelled with pride as everyone stopped talking and turned to face him. Remember, while you're here, your behavior represents UA. So don't do anything too embarrassing. Looking at you, Sparky. Kaminari blushed deeply and rubbed at the back of his neck. Still, so long as you don't get into anything stupid, you should be fine. Now, let's go take this on with everything we've got. Plus Ultra. The class roared in agreement, only to pause when loud chuckling made itself heard. Wow, you've got a hearty batch this year, huh Eraser. Aizawa-sensei groaned as a woman wearing a dark blue corset with baggy green and orange striped shorts walked up. Izuku grinned as he recognized Ms. Joke, one of the few hybrid heroes in Japan, working both in the limelight and underground. She walked up to him and immediately said, "Man, let's get married." Hitachi choked on his own spit and had to be resuscitated by a very worried Kaminari. The rest of the class all sent her confused glances. While the hero hopefuls had already known about Aizawa-sensei's marriage to Present Mike, they'd kept quiet about it initially out of respect for the two heroes' privacy. However, after the blonde kept showing up night after night, the rest of the class was getting suspicious. 2 quick ambushes and 1 interrogation later, the entire class was in on their relationship. Yoarashi was informed shortly after he moved into the dorms. So to hear Ms. Joke proposing to an already married man. Well, it was concerning. After a few awkward seconds of silence, Aizawa-sensei huffed warmly and crossed his arms. Relax, Hellspawn. It's just a running joke between the two of us. The heroine dropped her huge smile and adopted a much more genuine grin. Yeah, we've been friends for years. Initially, I had considered a relationship with this dolt, but then I met my current wife and realized how massively gay I was. It was around that time that this idiot finally got married, too. We've got a private chat where we gush about our partners. She quickly switched her gaze to Hitachi. Don't tell Mike. The purple-haired teen merely grinned, almost an exact replica of Aizawa-sensei's logical ruse face. I haven't the slightest clue what you're talking about. Why would I waste such prime blackmail material? Ms. Joke snorted. Adopted or not, you're definitely Eraser's kid. She scanned the class and frowned. You only expelled 1 student this year? You're getting soft. Aizawa-sensei coughed into his fist. Actually, I expelled 1 at the start of the year, who Hitachi replaced. Yoarashi replaced Todoroki, and the 20th is currently in a coma. We don't like to talk about it? The heroine winced. Yikes. That sucks. Still, to be able to face this exam with everything you've got, even with all that, takes guts. I'm impressed. See if you can impress me some more out there during the exam itself. Yeah. Izuku grinned. Plus Ultra, remember. I don't intend to disappoint. Chapter 36. Class 1A streamed out of the changing rooms, now clad in their hero costumes. The various HPSC employees standing by directed them to the auditorium, which was quickly filling up with second and third year students from other schools around the country. Izuku glanced around the massive room and whistled in admiration. Damn. It's almost twice as big as the entrance exam auditorium, and they're still struggling to fit everyone. Just goes to show how much competition there is out there. Hitachi nodded. UA may be the most well-known, but it definitely isn't the only producer of great heroes. See those guys in the ninja outfits over there? They're from Seijin High School, the alma mater of Ed Shot. And those girls in the matching white uniforms are from CA Academy, whose headmistress is said to rival Nezu himself in intelligence. Katsuki grunted, checking over his gauntlets and fiddling with his new visor. Big names don't mean shit. Let their abilities speak for them, not their reputation. Izuku huffed, checking through his equipment and making sure it was all in working order. You said it? The hero hopefuls had been working with Mei a lot in the weeks preceding the exam. Izuku's jumpsuit now sported pouches on the upper arms for more storage. Katsuki held flashbang-shaped capsules on his belt for carrying medical supplies, along with a small tank of drinking water on his back. Kyuka wore earrings shaped like metal balls, which she could plug her jacks into and detach them from the piercing to use as tiny flails. She also wielded her new combat guitar, made of a carbon steel alloy with tungsten strings and embedded speakers. Okako's old high heels were replaced with boots similar to 13's, matching her costume's color scheme and containing gyroscopes to orient her in midair, along with gauntlets that contained 30-meter grappling hooks. Kaminari's wrists sported tiny crossbows that would launch copper spikes, which would then draw his electricity into a focused point at long range. Kiri's Hima wore a shirt keyed to his DNA, meaning that hardening wouldn't tear it, so he had a measure of defense without his quirk activated. Kauda's costume now had pockets for throat lozenges and various types of animal food. Hitashi's mask could alter his voice to sound like someone else, and even helped him throw it around so that it sounded like it was coming from different directions. Of course, the biggest change was Yorashi's costume. Gone were the bulky pipes, massive cloak, and enormous left glove. He wore a dark blue jumpsuit over his body, made from the same material as everyone else's costumes. On his chest, he wore an aviator jacket, made of the same material as Izuku's vest and sporting several pockets for medical supplies. His head was covered by a standard pilot's helmet, complete with a tube leading to an oxygen tank that sat behind his shoulder blades. He also wore boots that had extending anchors and gloves that let him grip to rough surfaces easily, along with elbow and knee pads. In addition, his jetpack had its point cut off partway down the slope to leave a shelf for his oxygen tank, and it now sported tiny aesthetic wings on the sides. Once the auditorium had reached its max capacity, the doors slid shut as a man with messy beige hair walked up to the microphone on the stage up front. Hello, and welcome to the official provisional license exam. My name is Mara Yakumairo, and I'm the representative from the HPSC in charge of this event. Now, due to recent events, we've decided to make the passing requirements a little more strict. To be blunt, only 100 of you will pass this exam. At most. For reference, there are 1,540 of you taking the exam today. So you'll need to really go above and beyond if you want to pass this time. The auditorium devolved into mutters, and Izuku frowned. That's only a 6.5% chance of just getting through the first half. We're really gonna need our A game, here. Mara clapped his hands, grabbing everyone's attention. Right. Let's get this over with so I can go back to sleep. This exam will be divided into two sections. The first half will be a kind of elimination round, to weed out the best from the pack. He pulled out two objects, an orange ball and some kind of black disc with a silver rim. You will each be given 6 balls and 3 targets. You must place the targets somewhere visible on your person. If a person's 3 targets are hit, they're eliminated. Your goal is to eliminate 2 other opponents. The first 100 students to meet this requirement will move on to the second half of the exam. He touched the ball to the target, and it lit up red. Once the 100th person passes, the first half will end. Several HPSC employees began moving through the crowd, handing out balls and targets to each person. Izuku pondered the situation for a bit, before placing his targets in an inverted triangle in the center of his chest. Katsuki glanced over at his placement and raised an eyebrow. Aren't they easier to hit there? Izuku shook his head. They're actually the hardest to hit there. If they're on my chest, then anyone trying to hit them will have to attack from the front, where I can see them coming. If I placed one on my back, that'd just be a free hit for anyone who can sneak up on me. Katsuki hummed, before nodding. Makes sense. He placed his targets on his chest in a triangle pattern. The rest of the class quickly followed suit, arranging their targets on their chests in various formations. Once all of the balls and targets had been distributed, Mara announced, "Now, I believe you all have different terrains that you prefer. So, we've decided to provide a range of scenery." The ground rumbled, and the crowd gasped as the roof and walls fell away to reveal the sprawling arena around them. Izuku spotted a raised highway, a sprawling industrial complex similar to Ground Gamma, a flowing waterfall rimmed by a forest, a mountain range with a spiraling path up the tallest peak, a collection of office buildings, and a street lined with shops. You'll have 10 minutes to fan out and prepare before the exam begins in earnest. Now move quickly so I can get back to sleep. Immediately, the other schools began to spread out among the massive area. Izuku put his fingers in his mouth and let out a piercing whistle, then shouted, 1A, huddle up. Immediately, his classmates formed a tight circle around him. All right. The name of the game here is teamwork. People are going to be likely to ally themselves with people from their own school, since they're more likely to know each other's abilities. Katsuki nodded. Makes sense. Izuku held up a finger. Another thing, we're most likely prime targets for anyone else. Ashido frowned. Why? What did we do to them? Yoarashi huffed. It's because of the sports festival. Every year, UA's students have their capabilities broadcasted to the world. And while they won't know your names or exact quirks this year, they're likely smart enough to be able to connect costumes to names, and names to powers. Izuku nodded. Exactly. So, we need to focus on what we've done since the sports festival. Look through your available moves and figure out which ones they won't expect. And most importantly, stick together. I would suggest moving as a class, but we've all got such different styles, that wouldn't work out well. So, I'm thinking we'll split into specialized teams. Hitachi, Fumikage, and Hagakure. You three are our stealthiest group. Stick together and attack from the shadows. Fumikage nodded. Understood. Embrace the darkness, but do not lose sight of the light. Aitsa, Okako, Tsu, and Suro, you're our most mobile. Get in, hit fast and hard, and get out before they notice you. Okako grinned and smacked her fist into her palm. They won't know what hit them. Ajiro, Satu, and Shaoji are our big guns. You guys probably hit the hardest out of our class. Aoyama, Ashido, and Kauda, you go with them to provide long-range support. Kauda signed, I'll do my best. Yoarashi, I think you're one of the only ones in the class who can do the solo. You're the wild card, since you weren't there for the festival. Nobody's going to know what you can do. Get out there and kick ass. Yoarashi grinned. You got it? Alright. Kaminari, Kirishima, Kyuka, Katsuki, you're with me. We know each other's fighting styles the best out of anyone in the class. Teamwork is going to be our biggest advantage. Katsuki grinned and slammed a fist into his palm, letting off a quick explosion. You fucking know it? Izuku nodded and scanned the class. Alright. We all know our assignments. Now let's get out there and kick some ass. Right. Shouta grinned with pride as the blob that was his class split up into smaller groups, all running in different directions. From what he could tell, they'd split into smaller groups based on similar fighting styles, and Yoarashi had headed off on his own. Smart thinking. Emi huffed from her seat next to him. You'd think they'd stick closer together in a bigger group. Strength in numbers, and all that. Shouta grunted. They're going to be outnumbered no matter what they do, so they're splitting up the attention on them in order to make it more manageable. It's easier to fight off a combined attack from a single direction than several combined attacks from multiple directions. Emi frowned. So how come the one kid went off on his own? Is he cocky enough to think he can go solo? Shouta crossed his arms. Considering he's the wild card of the class, it's not exactly unfounded. He's the transfer student from Shikatsu. Not only does he have the element of surprise, but he's probably more powerful than just about any other single student in the class. Emmy hummed and scanned the field. I guess that's fair. You didn't tell your class about the crushing of UA, did you? Shouta snorted. Didn't need to. Even if Yorashi hadn't transferred to UA, the class rep probably would have figured it out regardless. Emmy raised an eyebrow at him. You seem awfully confident in your class abilities. What happened to the eraser that constantly downplayed his students' strengths? Shouta grunted. They're a good bunch. They actually lift each other up instead of just competing with each other all the time. Teamwork is one of their biggest strengths, and they're closer than any of my other classes from the experiences they've been through. Emmy gasped and held a hand over her heart. Why, Eraser, if I didn't know you any better, I'd say you're fond of these brats. Shouta blushed and turned away, feeling his face grow hot. I might have gotten attached. Blame Mike, he's the one who infected me with his infuriating optimism. Emmy giggled. I might have to send him a gift basket. Is he still hooked on banana mochi? Shouta grinned. Actually, he's moved on to grape. We've recently gained an appreciation for the color purple. Izuku stared up at the students surrounding his team on the cliffs above. The one in front with bushy black hair shouted, everyone knows it's logical to team up with your own class. Strength in numbers, UA. Izuku huffed. You seem to be laboring under the delusion that we're going to. What was the phrase? Come quietly. Well, I can tell you this, we have no intention of failing this exam. The blonde girl standing near him, clearly a woman of culture, shouted, enough of this. Take them. As the rest of her class glanced at her in confusion, Izuku grinned and equipped the masked hammer ability, sending up a tornado of fire as a distraction, drawing the enemy's attention as his group split up. Better go easy on her. Gotta respect a fellow nerd. Fumikage tapped on his leg in Morse code, sending a message to his two teammates as he stared up at the collection of Seijin High School students standing on the pipes above him. The one in front, dressed in red, called, You must be pretty cocky if you're taking us all on by yourself, Kurayami of 1A. Fumikage grunted. I take it you watched the sports festival. The red student huffed. Even if you're a UA student, you're still just a first year. There's no way you can hope to match an entire class with your own power. Fumikage chuckled. True. In a scenario such as this, I would not have a chance of succeeding on my own. The student in red laughed. So you admit that dash. Fumikage cut him off. Which is why it's a good thing that I'm not on my own. The red student paused. What? Suddenly, two of his classmates standing behind him were flung through the air by an unseen force, just as Ayama's capture scarf flung out and slammed another three students into each other, effectively taking them out of commission. The remaining half paused, still unsure of what was going on, and Fumikage moved. Abyssal Shroud. Dark shadow covered his head and forearms like a second skin, and he leaped off the ground, streaking through the air towards the clear leader of the group. Mustering a fake tone of confidence, the Seijin student shouted, Gather yourselves. It's just 5 on 3. Fumikage grinned, aware of how unsettling such an expression was when one had a raven's head. Not quite. Dark Shadow's eyes turned red, and their body expanded to massive proportions. Their shadowy form grew to cover not only Fumicage's arms, but also his legs. In only a few seconds, he was implanted in the center of a massive shadowy figure, complete with a raven's head and massive claws. Avatar of Tsukuyomi. Kaoji frowned as the pigeon he'd summoned gave its report. He reached into one of his pouches and pulled out a handful of bird seed, glancing over at his teammates as it began to feed. It says that there are several people on the highway, but only one of them looks normal. The rest are changed, it said. It was too disturbed to properly describe them. Xiaoji hummed, turning a hand into an ear and pressing it against a nearby support pillar. I'm definitely hearing multiple heartbeats. A lot of them are elevated, like they're in a state of panic. But I'm not hearing any screaming, which has me concerned. Kaoji glanced back down at the pigeon. It looked up at him and cooed, having finished the handful of birdseed. Fly away. I don't want you to get caught in whatever might happen. The pigeon trilled and flapped away, and Cowden knelt on the ground, laying one hand on the tarmac. He whistled, and a line of ants marched out of a hill, falling into formation at his feet. Ashido shivered. Gonna take me a while to get used to you doing that. Did your buddies have to help you get over your fear during the summer camp? The rest of the group sent various expressions her way as Kaoji spelled out his instructions. The pink-skinned girl huffed and crossed her arms. What? I get that it's really useful, but it's still kinda weird to see a bunch of ants march out of an anthill and line up in rows. The ants started crawling up a pillar, and Kaoji stood up, dusting his knees off. It's alright. I understand that not everyone has the same perspective on bugs. That kind of behavior is odd to see from insects, even if ants are the most predisposed to marching in file. Ashido nodded. Right. So, what did you tell them to do? They'll find the one person up there with the normal heartbeat, then form a ring underneath his feet on the underside of the highway. There should be enough natural lighting for them to be visible. Once I give the signal, I want you to hit that spot with your most corrosive acid. Though, please try not to hit the ants. Ashido grinned sheepishly. I'll try my best. What's the signal? Kaoji chuckled. You'll know it when you hear it. He moved towards the service ladder, motioning for Ajiro and Aoyama to follow him. The three of them quickly climbed up onto the highway, coming face to face with a teen wearing a shiketsu cap and surrounded by several balls of flesh. The teen scowled at them and announced, "And so, 3 more maggots crawl into my domain. Do you have the power to rise and become the best of the best? Or will you sully the reputation of the great with your incompetence? Let us not wait until you graduate to find out." Ajiro huffed. What the heck are you going on about? Kaoji's senses tingled, and he ducked as something flew in from behind and slammed into Ajiro, picking the boy up and compressing him into a ball of flesh, eyes, hair, and clothing, not unlike the other forms on the road. Ajiro was dropped into the shiketsu student's waiting right hand, as 5 fleshy globs floated in midair behind him. The teen huffed. Good reflexes, I suppose. But pure instinct will not be enough. Aoyama went pale. What are you doing, monsieur? Surely, you could have passed on your own after trapping a mere 2 other students, non. The other teen scoffed. This is not about simply passing or failing the exam. I do not trust the examiners to uphold the high standards that should come with heroism, so I am taking it upon myself to weed out those who do not fit the qualifications. Kaoji frowned and signed, and why do you think that you know what those qualifications are? The shiketsu student tilted his head. If you wish to speak to me, use words, not meaningless gestures. Aoyama gasped and placed a hand over his heart. Mon ami. Surely, you have heard of sign language. The other teen huffed. If such a thing were to exist, it would not be necessary for me to learn it. After all, why would a prestigious institution such as UA allow a lesser student to walk its halls? Surely all UA students are capable of speech. Kaoji scowled. That's rather rude. Just because someone can't talk doesn't mean they can't be a hero. The boy huffed again. I said, if you wish to speak to me, use your words. Your sign language, as you call it, means nothing to me. Kaoji sighed. I'll give you one more chance to end this peacefully. Otherwise, this might get rough. The teen scowled, the balls of flesh in midair tensing. Fine. If you will insist on this meaningless endeavor, then I will end this quickly. Then your companion and I can have an intellectual conversation, freak. Then again, with his ridiculous accent, I doubt I could understand him, anyway. The balls of flesh shot forward, and Kaoji shouted, Don't say I didn't warn you. On cue, the road underneath the student's feet melted, and he let out a high-pitched scream as he fell to the road below. There was a loud smack, and the people on the road began shifting, growing, and unfurling. Kaoji walked forward and glanced through the newly formed hole in the road. Ashido grinned back up at him, pointing to where Shaoji and Satu were standing over the shiketsu student's prone form, looking quite angry. Shaoji heard the whole thing and related to us. We don't like this guy very much. How's the situation up there? Kaoji glanced around as the other students started to recover from their transformation. Not good. The sooner you can get up here, the better. We need to fill in the numbers gap. Okako raised a hand to her helmet, activating her comm system. Guys, be careful. I just took out a sniper on this rooftop. There are probably a lot more students waiting inside. Aitsa responded, Thank you for the warning, Uravite. We will do this quickly and efficiently. It would be appreciated if you could join us when you can. Okako hummed, glancing over at the side of the building opposite where her group was entering. I might be busy ambushing them. They're currently entering the building on the opposite end. Send Froppy around the outside a couple floors up for surveillance. Zero sarcastically whined, "What, you don't think I can do surveillance? I'm hurt, Uravite." Okako snorted. "You know damn well what I meant, cellophane. Now shut up and move in with ignition." "Roger that." Tsu croaked, "I'm in position, Kuro." They're set up by the elevators, which are close to the side of the building. There's a window looking into the hallway connecting the two sides, and I've got a good view of the back of this girl who seems to be the leader. I'll crawl a floor up and decamouflage to let you know which side, Uravite." Okako grinned and cracked her knuckles. "Alright, let's do this." Ineza grinned widely as his wind snatched the balls from the crowd of people on the streets below. "I'll be taking those." One of them shouted, "Hey, give those back. We need those to pass this exam." Several of the others started nodding in angry agreement, and the feeling spread until the entire crowd was yelling up at him. He soaked in the noise like a sponge, letting it grow until it reached a fever pitch. Eventually, he called out, "Man, you're all so passionate. I love passionate heroes, you know. So as a gift, I'll give you your balls back. Here, see if you can catch them." With a swipe of his right hand, the whirling tornado of balls was sent streaking through the street below, slamming into target after target. In only a few seconds, he'd eliminated the entire street of people. As he basked in his achievement, the HPSC guy shouted, "Wait, one person just eliminated 120 people all at once." His targets lit up blue, and an automated voice said, "You have passed the first half of the exam. Please proceed to the waiting room at the edge of the arena." Ineza chuckled and swirled the wind into his pack, sending him speeding through the air towards the large room set into a wall of the arena. As he passed over the now destroyed mountain range, he glanced down and grinned at the sight of a familiar uniform. The wind stopped, and he dropped to the ground right behind the familiar face. Her targets lit up blue. "Hey, Kami-senpai. Wasn't expecting to run into you here." The Shiketsu upperclassman turned to face him with a grin. "Yo bro. Been a hot minute. Totes yeet that we found each other. Looks like you're doing high-key great at UA, brosafe." Ineza snorted. "Still as hard to understand as ever, I see. Alright, that's where we'll leave off for the day. Thanks so much for listening along with me today. If you enjoyed, please like and comment down below. It really helps with the algorithms. I look forward to seeing you next time. Ciao for now, lovelies.